Hey guys, this is Kenny from learnhowtoprosper.com and here for another episode of my Master the Book of Mormon deep dive. And I like to do this every day if I can. And it's one of the things I like to do just to kind of randomize my study is to come here to learn and then click on flashcards. And I can click on identify this chapter. So the synopsis of this one is contention erupts over the judgment seat after Pahoran's death. Pahoran is appointed chief judge, was secretly murdered by Kishkumen, a cunning assassin who mingles among the people in disguise and escapes detection. Kishkumen and his secret band, bound by covenant, marked the dangerous rise of a conspiratorial movement that will plague the Nephites for generations. Pakumeni becomes chief judge, but is slain when Coriantumr, a bold Lamanite commander, swiftly captures their Hemla. Moronihah leads the Nephite armies to defeat Coriantumr, retakes their Hemla. One of the interesting things that, in the way of a theme that appear over again and over again and over again in the Book of Mormon, is this idea of secret combinations. I don't know if you've heard this word before, but there are a couple of places that warn of this significantly. I know that certainly Nephi saw our day, and he saw the rise of what they said is basically two churches, the Church of God and the Church of the Devil. And that it all came down to just those two. And he was talking about our day. So there were those who would follow God and those who had an allegiance together, an alliance to, in essence, eliminate God completely and to instead follow, for lack of a better way to put it, Satan and his guidance and oversight. It was kind of interesting. Now, another place where it talks about this is Moroni makes quite the warning if you're in the early chapters of Ether, where he talks about the Jaredite nation and how this entire nation, another group of people that came at the time of the Tower of Babel over to the Americas, and their language was preserved and there were a lot of blessings given to them. But after, a number, it's always like a couple hundred years, things start to go south. And oftentimes it's when the people become somewhat prosperous and almost immediately they turn to these secret allegiances and alliances, right? Secret combinations. And so this is talking about one of those moments. I happen to, I'm pretty sure this is in Helaman 2. Yeah. Helaman becomes chief judge. Yeah, Pahoran 2 murder. Yeah, I think it might be this first chapter. Pretty sure. We'll find out. Yeah, so let's just go take a look at it. It's kind of interesting in this first chapter of Helaman. And what's really interesting about this book of Helaman is it's the period of time preceding the appearance of Christ upon the among the Lamanites and Nephites in the Americas. And so you almost get kind of a feeling of what it was like leading up to the Lord's coming to the earth. And I believe that if you read those chapters, really starting with Helaman 1, going through each one of those, if you want to see what the world was like then compared to what the world is like now, it can give you a pretty good precursor of what we can expect to happen as things continue. I mean, we do live in crazy times. I was just listening today that here in Utah, not only here, but worldwide, there's a massive decrease in the fertility rate, meaning that we're now below replacement rate. And, people think, oh, well, it's no big deal. So what? Well, the entire growth of societies is its most valuable resource is people. And of course, Satan, the adversary, if you want to learn more about the purpose of life, you can go to the purpose.learnhowtoprosper.com, where I talk more about this. But in essence, um, there is an opposition, and that opposition it wants to go directly against what God has planned for his people and for the purpose of this life, which is to come here into this life, to gain a body, to have an experience. Therefore, the importance of providing a family environment and situation is of paramount importance. And to say nothing of all the different little things, so often, it's kind of interesting because early in the Book of Mormon, Amulek and Alma are talking to Zeezrom, who's an attorney, and they're talking about how attorneys were the foundation of the corruption and the downfall of most societies, because they create all these, you start having litigation, you start having all these rules and laws and things that work against the people, and invariably they use that as a cudgel to beat upon people and keep them in a certain way of thinking. And meanwhile, the Gadiantans, as I call them, those who the secret band of those that create these secret combinations, they're just running roughshod over society. You see it right in today's world. I don't talk a lot about politics on this, but you can see the incredible corruption among a lot of the government agencies on both sides. It doesn't really matter which party. And, I guess what I would say is there's already kind of secret alliances. There are different levels of it, but the ones that we could certainly contend with to some degree is just the fact that our representatives here in the United States, they vote in pay raises for themselves. They don't use Social Security. They don't have to. They have their own pension plan. They have their own payment plan. They have their own health insurance. So what do they care? They're not that concerned about the rest of society. So I think this is a cautionary tale about what happens when you outsource your thinking to human nature, because ultimately this is what happens. The whole story of the Book of Mormon are civilizations that rise and fall on a very predictable cycle. They start out poor and they start out desperate and they're asking and begging God for help. And then as they start to become prosperous, it's like, oh, never mind, we got it. And then pretty soon there is no God. And then it's just all about whatever they want to do. And so understand this. I know I'm going on a rant today, but that is the purpose of the Book of Mormon. It is to tell us and warn us about what happens in cycles over and over and over again. And I don't even know how many times it says in the Book of Mormon that if you follow the commandments of God, you'll prosper in the land. It was kind of the foundation of this whole domain that I built, Learn How to Prosper. If you want to learn how to prosper, truly, we have to learn to rely on God, to respect him, and to understand that everything that he's given us is not, it's only for the purpose of helping us grow and helping us prosper. That's it. That's what he wants us to do. And prosper happens in all the ways. And like in my case, I talk about health, wealth, relationships, and faith. But take relationships, for example. If you want to prosper in relationships, there are certain principles that must prevail. And it's so interesting because every single generation thinks they got it figured out, and they think they can do it their own way. In these times now, it's just polyamory. People, I can have multiple multiple women, or bring in multiple men into a relationship, and thruples and all this stuff. And it's just, if you talk to those people, it's like a 99% failure rate, and yet, it tickles the ears. People, oh, it sounds good. It sounds so amazing. These things are all evil. If you want to learn more about that, just go to the Book of Jacob in the Book of Mormon, where he talks to the man who had started taking on wives and concubines and all this kind of thing. It's evil, and he doesn't mince words about that. And of course it's evil. I mean, just look at it. It's so funny. People, oh, I want to do what I want to do. Well, yeah, okay, but don't whine about the consequences when, when it turns against you. So there you go. Man, I'm on a rant today. But if you come here to this chapter, you can read through it, but it's kind of interesting. And some of the language of the Book of Mormon you have to get used to. Like this might bother some people. I'm so used to it now when it uses things like came to pass in the commencement of the 40th year of the reign of the judges. And what's interesting about this reign of judges is up until then they had kings and Alma at the time, Alma the younger actually, at the time that he was going to become the chief judge and the high priest said, it's not good to have a king because kings can take over things. What we want to do instead is have a reign of judges. So it's almost like it's a representative type government. What's interesting about not only representative, but it was more of a constitutional type form of government, meaning that principles would reign, meaning that there were a set of laws and principles that dictated human conduct. And you could go back to those as a reference, and you had more than just one judge. You had multiple judges that could kind of keep things in the proper way. Now, once a certain preponderance of people become evil, it doesn't matter because all the judges become evil or bought out, and then things go south. So it's, almost any government is dependent upon a moral people. And that's the same for our nation, for example. I think Thomas Jefferson or maybe it was Benjamin Franklin said that the constitutional form of government that was established in this nation is wholly unuseful to a corrupt people. I mean, you got to have an ungodly people, that God is at the center of it. And that's just the way it is. I mean, that's why I want to speak to it very overtly and openly, because it doesn't do any good to speak to other forms of living that are only going to bring you misery. But if you want to learn more about that, come here and read through Helaman chapter 1. In fact, I was just going to do this just for the fun of it. Remember that it has this AI assistant, and you can go through what's the main message. Let's see what the main message is of this, and we won't read the whole thing per se. Let's see what kind of the powerfully illustrates the destructive nature of internal contention and secret combinations and the resilience required to overcome such threats. It's so true. I mean, once it gets embedded in society and people are figuring out ways to cheat, and most of these secret combinations, it's what it means is these secret alliances that people make. You can see it in Minnesota right now, where they have these groups that create these NGOs, these non-government organizations, 503(c) nonprofits, where they just funnel money through them, and all these people are putting it in their pockets, and then they're representing to the government that's, of course, paying it, which is not really the government, because the government doesn't really generate anything. We do. It's us that pays for these things. It's through taxes, and that's true of every country. It's through our own wealth, and it's our own, it's the byproduct of our efforts that are now being squandered through these. And that's what it's saying. And once that gets in, because once there's two things that happen when society starts to crumble. One is the government always says, I'll take care of you, and you don't have to be accountable or responsible. And we'll make you safe. The only thing is you won't be free. And so it takes, in order to maintain a free society, you have to have people who are willing to be accountable and who value freedom as the highest value that you can have in society. And obviously, if the government can convince the preponderance of people, the majority of them, that they'll take care of them and they'll write them checks. And pretty soon people are like, yeah, I think I'll take that. I'll take the freeway. I'll take the check. Well, what happens is they just lose. Pretty soon they lose the motivation, the will. And at first they're a little bit embarrassed about receiving the free help. And then after a while, it's like they're demanding it. Just like you saw during COVID. I mean, it was unbelievable how many people just got used to, just hand me the free checks. Let me just work from home. And you can see these things reflected in the Book of Mormon. That's why I'm on this rant today. The main message revolves around the vulnerability of a people to internal strife, even when external enemies are present, and the dangerous rise of secret societies. It highlights how the lust for power can lead to murder and conspiracy, ultimately destabilizing a nation and inviting further conflict. Why do you think there's so much resistance to the Book of Mormon? How it's, they created this play on Broadway to mock and make a mockery of the Book of Mormon and those who love it and represent it. And look, I've been a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints my whole life, 6 decades. And we are a kind of a peculiar people, easy to kind of point to and mock at. And there are things about it in the culture that are pretty annoying, to be honest. I would admit to that. And I think that we're falling prey to many of the things that the Book of Mormon warns about. And the interesting thing is that for the most part, the Book of Mormon is for us. It's for the covenant people, for those who profess to love God. And so we should not be patting ourselves in the back ever, because the main message of the Book of Mormon is that we become prideful in the church and outside of the church. And when we do, bad things happen. And are we a prideful people? Yeah, because we're people. And that's what happens. You have to always retain that in memory at all times. Nation inviting further guys. Specifically, the chapter demonstrates the contention over leadership as seen in the struggle for the judgment seat after Pahoran's death. Creates an opening for evil to flourish. The emergence of Kishkumen and his secret band, driven by a covenant to murder and gain power, serves as a stark warning about the insidious nature of secret combinations. These groups operate in darkness, undermining justice and peace from within. Isn't that true? Do you see that? Despite the internal turmoil, the chapter also conveys a message of hope and divine protection through righteous leadership, as Moronihah's strategic military actions ultimately restore order and repel the Lamanite invasion that capitalized on the Nephites' internal weaknesses. And ultimately, Helaman 1 teaches us about the perpetual struggle between good and evil, both within society and within ourselves. There you go, people. I'm going to end my rant today and just let you know that I love this book with all my heart. I think it's a book that can save society. And you'll be more powerful for reading it. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a member. And no, you won't grow horns. And no, nothing bad's going to come to you if you read the book. It's just simply a book about a societies down at the family level that were directed to come to a place of safety that God directed them. And you get to see the cycle of what happens to them. And the end of the story is kind of sad. And by the way, it foretells what will happen to the people here of the promised land and other promised lands, and what will happen to them if we don't follow and obey God and the principles that lead to prosperity, happiness, and eternal life. And with that, I'm going to sign off for today. I hope you have a stupendous, amazing, fantastic day. And I'm going to end my rant today with those words. Have a good one.